Hey, it's Greg Stanley. Do you know you can now win prizes such as a Starbucks gift card, Concord tickets, or car swag for being the first to answer an entertaining trivia question? Get the weekly trivia question by following me on Instagram or Facebook at the Collector Car Podcast and just DM me your answer. The first person with the correct answer wins. Also, as a new aspect of my automotive passion and hobby, I am a car specialist consultant for RM Sotheby's. If you need assistance consigning a collector car at Amelia Island, Pebble Beach, Auburn, West Palm, or Hershey, email me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com.
This is the Collector Car Podcast, the home for the auto enthusiast. Join Greg Stanley as he applies over 25 years of insights and analytical experience to the collector car market. He will interview the experts and throw in some fun stuff as well.
All right, well, this is Greg at the Collector Car Podcast. Today we got a cool guest, Nick Jaynes. Nick, how you doing today?
Very well. Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, now we met through LinkedIn, I think, because I like your articles about the Youngtimer cars and sports car market, which is a great magazine, so I always find it interesting, and I can't quite remember how we met, but if you would, could you tell me kind of what you do, not only with sports car market, but also with your main job?
Yeah, well, I've been working with sports car market, now for maybe almost a decade. Started doing video work with them a long time ago at an auction in Portland, and it's sort of transitioned over the years to taking on covering the Youngtimer collection, which is fun. I'm sort of the on-staff millennial opinion on things, but I'm maybe a bit more curmudgeonly than more millennials to me. That brings a little bit of fun with it.
For the record, that's what I like about your articles. That curmudgeonly comes through, which I like.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Sometimes I feel like I'm being too much of a downer, but it also is meant to maybe put a little bit of spin of reality or a reality check on some of these things, but we can get to that in a minute. And outside of sports car market, I am the director of communications for Overland Expo, which is America's leading event series for overlanding, off-roading, camping, all those good things.
Yeah, if you would talk about that a little bit, like what is that exactly? I mean, I know that's a huge thing right now with people jumping in their trucks that are all, kitted out the right way to, kind of go off into the woods, right?
Yeah. I mean, originally overlanding, originated in, Africa and Australia. Guys that jump in their Land Rovers typically transition to a lot of Toyotas, but, drive across the outback or the bush for 2 weeks. And the whole idea is about overlanding is the adventure and the journey itself is the point and not necessarily the location or, where you're going to the destination. And that's sort of come to America and in a fun way. Obviously, we have a lot of great public lands. It's not always quite legal for people to drive it across, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot of great wilderness for families to explore. And that's really where it's transitioned, going from a bunch of hardened Aussie bogans wheeling in the desert to families getting together in their Jeeps, in their Land Rovers, and exploring America's natural beauty and being self-sufficient along the way. You bring food, fuel, water, all those things you'd expect on an African safari, but doing it across Colorado with your family. I think it's really growing and blowing up right now in a good way. So I'm excited to be a part of that team and expose more people to overlanding and off-roading in a fun family way.
Now, do you have your own overland adventure you can share with us?
Oh gosh, I'm always going on some, because it's my job and my hobby, right? So I've got a Jeep Gladiator pickup that I've built up for overlanding, and I was just actually out in eastern Oregon for a week with my buddy a few weeks ago. Hit the John Day Fossil Bed National Monument, also Painted Hills National Monument out there, and lots of beautiful land in between. So yeah, always doing something.
Oh, that's awesome! Wow, yeah, that's really cool. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, now you mentioned the Jeep in your garage. Anything else in your garage?
Not at the moment, but and I actually read about this for the new edition of American Car Collector coming out, I think in June. That I've got my eye on a Corvette C4. I think that's sort of an underloved Corvette generation, and I'm keen to put one in my driveway because you can get some really killer deals on them for under $10,000. So that's what I've got my eye on next.
I would have to agree with you. I love the C4s, especially the later C4s. Now, I don't know the special edition. I know they had like a teal one that was a special edition. They had a white with a red interior and had the white wheels with it as well. And then obviously you had the Grand Sport, which was, the last year of the C4s maybe?
Yep. Yeah, you can get a non-Grand Sport 96 because it's OBD2. I think that's the sweet spot. And, obviously it was a short model year because C5 came out that fall, but those are winners if you can find them. Now,
so which one are you specifically looking for?
I'm not actually married to a 96, although I do love OBD2. It takes a lot of the fear out of sports car ownership. But
now, for our listeners and myself, what is OBD2?
OBD2 is the computer control system where you can plug in a reader and diagnose problems, and the car serves them up to you through a check engine code system, rather than trying to guess your way through what's going on with your car.
So was that the first one, was 86-ish?
96 is 96 is when the federal government demanded all new cars have OBD2 going forward. So that makes that a little bit of an easier vehicle to own in terms of not guessing it, throwing parts at maintenance, right?
Yeah. Ironically, I bought my first reader this week for my 99 996. I was like,
okay,
nice. Engine light, that's not good. Let me plug it in. Code 306. Okay, I got to change the coil on the 6-cylinder. That's it. So that's got it on order. So it helps out tremendously.
Cool. That's great. Yeah. My dream is to have a C4 that's got that, retina burning red leather interior. I think I want like white, but I'm not married to the outside color, but I have to have that red.
Yeah, that white with the red is real nice. I know they had that anniversary car that was maroon with maroon and a maroon top. My uncle had one of those. So a lot of great options in the C4 world. So keep us apprised on that one. That would be interesting to see how that goes. Yeah, well, that's really cool. Well, now where'd your love for cars start?
Gosh, that's hard to say. Frankly, I didn't care about cars until I was about 17. I got a job at a Chevron station. Oregon is still pump your own, or it's illegal to pump your own gas. So we have gas station attendants here, and I got a job pumping gas at a local Chevron, and started noticing cars driving through. And my buddy's dad got an Audi when I was in high school, and that was the first time I go, oh man, like that's a beautiful car. That's cool. And it's really ballooned from there. I've owned upwards of 50 cars myself. I was an automotive journalist for 7 years and had a new car each week, for a week in my driveway. And that actually satiated a lot of that desire to get a new car all the time, thank God. It's just ballooned. I mean, I love the idea that you can feel like a different person getting a new car, and that sort of was an early stage of my life. You test out sort of who you want to be growing up. I did buying different cars. I had a 61 Falcon when I was 19 and a 64 Volvo 544, and actually had two of those and things of that nature. You play with what your personality is going to be, and cars have just become an integral part of defining my own personality, especially outwardly to the world.
Right. Now, how did you become the Youngtimer quote-unquote expert? Is it because obviously your age has something to do with that, but do you have a affinity for those cars? Did you own a bunch of those cars in the past? Are you an expert? Kind of go over that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think it is sort of that, I don't have a real direct answer for that because it sort of morphed over time. I was writing about, for a while, I had a 71 MGB when I lived in Detroit that I was restoring and maintaining. I was writing about that, and it was sort of an odd vehicle for a millennial to pick. And as the Youngtimer, market started to climb, Chester, the editor-in-chief, just started sending me, market moment assignments and things of that nature around Youngtimer, and I guess he liked my attitude and a view of those cars. I'm not all bought in on the intrinsic value of those vehicles, especially when we see $176,000, twin turbo Targa Supras crossing the line. I'm skeptical of that sort of value. So I think I'm not just a cheerleader. I'm not rah-rah about the up-and-coming 80s, 90s market. So I think maybe Chester likes a bit of, a sass and curmudgeonly attitude about this sort of stuff. So that's my best guess, at least. In terms of being an expert, I mean, I was a mechanic outside of high school, working my way through journalism school. I wrenched on Volvos and Saabs, and like I said, I've collected and owned a lot of vehicles from that era as well, back when you could get Supras for $11,000 instead of $176,000, and things of that nature. So have an expert, maybe not, but do I have a good sense for mechanics, value, and maybe have my finger on the pulse of pop culture? Maybe,
Well, I'd call you an expert. Now, can you tell us, where did the Youngtimer name come from?
I think it was RM Auctions or RM Auction Sotheby's who originally coined it last year, maybe the year before. It's all a blur, honestly, because when you see these vehicles that, again, were worth $12,000 8 years ago, going for close to $200K or more, it all becomes a blur. But I think there was a big collection that came out of France that someone dubbed the Youngtimer collection because it was mostly vehicles from the 80s and 90s. So I think, and frankly, I don't love Youngtimer. I think it's sort of a lazy moniker. I wish someone would remake it, but I think it's got its talons now in the market and it's too late. But I really wish there were a better word for it.
Yeah, and it was that, I think 2017, it was the one with 140 Youngtimers cars. And I remember hearing that. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know if that's going to stick. And boy, it sure has so far. So yeah. Wow.
I mean, Radwood, I think, is a better, term, and especially with that movement, it's got so much popularity. I'd love to see that get, hoisted upon that, but I doubt it'll happen.
Yeah. And actually, I just had my previous guest, or one of my previous guests, was Rick Schmidt from National Parts Depot, and he mentioned, he has a 14 car collection. A lot of them go into the 90s, and he just didn't think there was a market for aftermarket parts for a lot of these cars because they last so long. First off, the parts last so long, but then they're also when they're so complex, and it's hard for someone in his garage to wrench on them. And kind of the same feeling like this. He didn't think that he thought it would cap out sooner than later just because of the feasibility to work on it in your garage. Which is why a lot of the cars from the 60s were so popular, because you could actually work on them. So, well, now what trends are you seeing in the Youngtimers marketplace?
It seems like the 80s BMWs are even going up. We just saw an auction of an 88 BMW 535i go for $38,000 in Utah a couple weeks ago. And of course, any of the Alpinas from that era and M cars from that era are going up. But to see just a 535i start kissing $40,000 to me is crazy. And obviously, the Japanese sports cars from that era are now becoming worth their weight in gold. Nissans are retarded a little bit in the growth, but certainly Toyotas are experiencing a huge bump right now. And I think a lot of that is tied to obviously the popularity of Fast and Furious and putting those at the top of millennials' brains. And now that they've got some money, they're turning their fortunes to that generation.
Right. Now, how would you define Youngtimers? Would it be, because it does overlap into the JDM world. Would you say, 79 to 96, something like that?
Yeah, I guess you could go back to that, the early first-gen Supras and some of the early, or late RX-7. But I would probably, my brain is sounding, maybe 82 is probably a good starting point, and up to maybe 98, maybe less, maybe 96. I guess you could push into the early 2000s if you really wanted to. But yeah, I'd say 82 to late 90s.
Right. Because I know like the Acura NSX, that falls in both categories. I mean, it could be a JDM. Well, it depends on if it came from Japan or not. But
right.
There's a lot of Asian cars in the Youngtimers movement, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it really goes back to that the longevity too, and a lot of the build quality. I mean, that's what's shocking to me is, again, like a C4 from that same generation is not going up, but an RX car is, and what that's all about, I don't know. Frankly, I'd rather own a Chevy every day of the week with a pushrod V8 than, a twin-turbo V6 from Japan, not least because I'm 6'5" and can barely fit in a Supra, but just for parts availability and things of that nature, I don't know, but people have different tastes.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you kind of threw me a curveball there because I was thinking, all right, Youngtimer expert, probably Mercedes, BMWs, Audis are your wheelhouse, but you're throwing Corvettes at me. So what is your dream Youngtimers car?
I mean, I guess because they are top of mind right now, maybe a first gen, an E28 M5 would be right there. I think that to me that's a sweet spot because it's got the holdover S38 M1 engine, but it's 4-door, so it's kind of nerdy. But then it's got that amazing E28 chassis, and you can row the gears in it, and it looks as good standing still as it does at 130. I think. But again, one of the things that I hammer on, and you kind of have to if you're into the Youngtimer thing, because these kind of cars, except until you get to Camaro or Fox Body Mustang, a lot of these cars are kind of nerdy. I mean, let's be honest. It took a bunch of Japanese nerds to come up with the R32 GTR, right? So that's what I kind of like about the nerdiness of some of those Beamers, especially M cars from that era. They've got a bit of family utility, about a bit of nerdiness, but they're also got a little bit of a touch of evil to them, I think.
Yeah, that's really funny you said that because I've been trying to quantify Youngtimers, what's in a Youngtimers category, and I'm like, are 911s Youngtimers? And by the date range, yeah, they are. But then I think, well, the Youngtimers are more 928s, 944 turbos, or the Mercedes station wagons, it's kind of still being defined, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no great rhyme or reason to your point. Yeah, I mean, it can be old family saloons and wagons that are, with big engines, or it can be, really calculating Japanese sports cars, and then they leave some American muscle out of it, and Porsches too. But I guess the Lufka cult is its own thing now.
Yeah. Now, if you were to say, "Hey, I'll give you $100,000 to buy some Youngtimer cars," what would you buy as an investment? Ones you think are going up in value based on the movement?
If you can still find an Audi Quattro that someone hasn't overly valued, I think that is a good one, because I think a lot of people are, again, turning towards Toyota and BMW and overlooking some of the outliers. Gosh, I don't. Do they even fall? I mean, I think some of the 80s and 90s Alphas are pretty cool, and I feel like those are getting overlooked a little bit. But again, they're so breaky that I don't blame anyone for overlooking them. I think parts availability is got to be an underlying part of all of this, because again, you can get pretty much any part for an 80s BMW still through BMW, and similarly with Mercedes. So I think those Mercedes, what 190E 24 valve are going to be going up too. Got 100,000. What else? I guess I'd have to start getting Nissans as well because they're not jumping up yet, but I think they will. Similar with the last gen RX-7, the round body one. Those starting to climb, but I think they're just going to enjoy even more growth.
Yeah, those are cool little cars.
Yeah, and I guess lastly, I'd probably look at some of the rarer versions of the IROC Z. I think those are going to start climbing too. Now that the Fox Body Mustangs are starting to be worth stupid money, I think the Camaros are going to start seeing their day in the sun. But I'm a little biased. I'm a GM guy, so.
Right. Well, speaking of stupid money, you can go back and listen to my market moments on the Fox Body Mustangs, where I did a deep dive in the Fox Body Mustangs, which doesn't happen on many podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So maybe you can give, because I was just talking about this with my buddy. Maybe you can give me some insight. What is the appeal of the Fox Body Mustang? Because to me, it looks like an economy notchback designed in the Ford, administration, which it is. But why are they so popular now? Why are they so hot? I just never saw.
I just think it's a generational thing. I think, like me, the first Mustang I ever drove was an '86 GT. Okay. And like my wife hates those body styles, and I love them only because I had them right at that right moment. So I think that's what it is. I think it's parts availability. To your point, I think you can mod that engine so many ways to Sunday, and forever they've been just cheap beaters, So I think the ones that were taken care of and are rare, especially the R model Cobra, I think those things will continue to climb. So. Cool. Same with the IROCs, like you said. I think there's some really rare ones there, and the Pontiac Firehawks, I think those are going to go up as well. So there's some good stuff there. Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. Okay, well, at the end of this, I like to play a little game. I did give you a heads up called Keep, Cash, and Crush. Okay. So you've you've thrown me a bunch of curveballs here because I picked for you 3 Youngtimer cars that you're familiar with. I think you wrote articles on 2 of them. I didn't pick any GM stuff. I would have done that if I knew you were a GM guy. So anyways, here's the 3 cars. So one of them you get to keep forever, one you have to cash in, and one you have to crush. Okay. So your first car is the 89 Mercedes-Benz. This is the longest title in the world, by the way. Yeah. 1989 Mercedes-Benz 560 SCE AMG 6.0 wide body.
Oh,
that was that was one of those RM cars.
Yeah.
The next one, also an RM car, you mentioned it earlier, pretty much. A 93 Toyota Supra twin turbo, but this is the sports roof one, not the Target top. That's sold for $178. And then the third one is a 1994 BMW Alpina B12 5.7 coupe that was also part of that European sale.
Oh, you're killing me, man.
That's the goal.
Yeah. You gotta keep the Toyota only because I think people are expecting those to keep climbing. I would sell cash, the Mercedes. I guess I'd crush the Beamer.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So you're cashing in the most expensive one. It actually sold for $336,000, doubling the high estimate of that sale. Yeah. That's a good one to cash in.
Yeah, I think because for some reason my gut tells me that's the top of that market for now. So we'll see, though. You might see 1 or 2 go higher, but I don't know if there's a big enough market for those. But we'll see. I could be wrong. I've been wrong a lot. So
Right, yeah. And so crushing the Alpina. Now, speaking of which, you just wrote an article on the BMW M3 lightweights, and you were pretty rough on those. Can you tell us a little bit about your gist on the lightweights?
Oh no! Well, let's not mince words here. I was rough on that vehicle specifically. Specific one, and not the breed, right? I think they handled beautifully. They were pretty neat, but I think my real beef with that one was that I don't think it being owned by Paul Walker gives it any sort of extra value. Also, because I'm not a big fan of Paul Walker and what I feel like he did to the car scene for young people, but glorifying street racing and adding stupid coffee can mufflers to cars, I think really set us back a little while. But I don't know. So that again, I think those are very neat cars, but is it worth that kind of money, especially one just because a famous person sat in it and it numbered in amongst his collection? No, I think you and I were talking about it offline that one was wrecked and things of that nature. So,
right, I think it was a 4,000-mile example, but it sold for over $300,000, which is crazy. But it turns out it had been wrecked on a track or something. So, just really crazy math going on there in my head. So,
yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thank you
for that one.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today. What's the best way for our listeners to learn more about you and the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, well, my Instagram is, at Nick Jaynes, pretty easy. And you can follow along what I'm doing there. If you want to check out Overland Expo, it's just overlandexpo.com. We have rescheduled our West event, which is typically in May. Obviously, we have pushed that to late July for obvious reasons. And then we have one in August in Colorado, and then one in East in October in Virginia. So hopefully folks will find some interest and come out to that because there's room to love cars outside of just sports cars. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time today, Nick.
Cheers. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to the Collector Car Podcast. Don't forget to give us a nice rating on iTunes and be sure to follow us on Instagram and everywhere else at the Collector Car Podcast.